Story 47. I caught my girlfriend cheating and ended up with a new roommate. I, 27 male, met my GF Karol, 28 female, a little over a year or so back through some close friends. Karol had moved into the area a year after having a messy breakup with her ex-fiancé. She moved halfway across the United States to start a new life. My college friend Bren and her husband Jason introduced us because we were both single, and they thought Karol could use someone in her life. She was Bren's childhood friend, and they went through school together until they went to different colleges. Initially, we were very cautious about each other because of her past. Jason and Bren had told me about her a few months ago to see if I was interested in meeting her. I gave Bren the thumbs up to see if Karol would be interested in meeting me at some point in the future. Bren told me that Karol thought I was cute and said she'd definitely like to meet me. Karol did say she had some lingering insecurity over her previous relationship, so she wanted it to be pretty low-key. Bren had told me that her ex had dumped her for another woman a couple of months before the wedding, and that it had hit Karol hard. Apparently, they had been together since high school. It had only been a little under a year since the breakup. From my perspective, that was fine since the last thing I wanted was to date someone who was still pining for another guy. A couple of months passed, and there was a 4th of July party at Jason and Bren's place. This party was big, and at least 20 other guests showed up. Besides making the introductions, Jason and Bren didn't try to force us into uncomfortable situations. Karol and I spoke a few times during the party, and even had some good laughs after talking about how we met Jason and Bren. By the end of the evening, while watching the fireworks display from Jason and Bren's backyard, they lived close to the park that the yearly show used, Karol and I sat beside each other chatting. We said our goodbyes and went back to our lives. About 2 weeks later, Bren reached out to me to tell me she had given my phone number to Karol at her request, telling me to expect a message from her soon. It took Karol another couple of weeks to get up the courage to text me, but eventually I got a message. We started chatting regularly, meaning a few exchanges daily that grew into a few dozen a day. Those exchanges then grew into phone calls, and eventually, we met again when J and B invited us to their house for dinner. Bren had been talking with Karol, and she'd mentioned that I had not initiated anything more than calls and texting. Bren assured her it was because I was trying to respect her feelings. Bren broke that ice by calling me and then telling me I was dumb and needed to come to dinner at their house that night. When I showed up, Karol was already there. As I walked in, I hugged Bren and shook Jason's hand like always. As I turned to Karol, she stepped up and hugged me shyly. I hugged her back, and the ice was broken. We had an amazing first date with Jason and Bren, which led us to go out with each other regularly over the next couple of months. We officially started dating, but took it slowly. Within a few weeks of dating, we started having a physical relationship, and things were going well. We did a lot of double dating with Jason and Bren, and really became close to them. About 3 months into the relationship, I got a call from Bren, and she was acting strange. She started questioning me about how things were going with Karol, so I gave her a pretty detailed update that things were going slowly, but I was optimistic. I told Bren that I was going to invite Karol to go on vacation with me before the holiday season. Bren asked me if I'd noticed Karol acting strange in the last couple of weeks, and I told her no, other than she's been a bit standoffish about physical contact. I'd been careful to allow her time to adapt to a new relationship. She seemed open to intimate contact, like holding hands, hugs, and even kissing, but recently, she hasn't initiated anything. I just told her I thought Karol had some emotional baggage and I was trying to be patient. Bren seemed hesitant to expand, so I calmly asked her why. I told her it was obvious she was alluding to something. It took a few back-and-forth exchanges until Bren let out a little sob over the phone. I remember taking a deep breath with my head spinning, then asked her what was wrong. Bren started crying and told me that Karol had admitted she was pregnant and had been seeing someone on the side. She said Karol was freaking out since it had to belong to the other guy, as we had always been careful to use birth control. Bren said she blew up and insisted that Karol tell me. Karol told her she would and asked Bren to let her handle it. I was stunned at the revelation. Bren asked me what I was going to do. I told her I had no clue and that I'd need to step back and think about it. Bren then asked me if I would keep it confidential, but I felt that I needed to know. I told her I would. After getting off the phone with Bren, I had a little emotional breakdown myself. I decided to stop all communication with Karol from my side and only interacted with her when she reached out. I only responded to texts she sent, never initiating any new conversations. It was a few days before Karol called me to ask if I was okay. I stayed true to my promise to Bren and told her I was super busy with work. That seemed to make Karol feel better, and we chatted about inane, stupid stuff while all I wanted to do was get off the phone. She could feel the vibe and asked me a few times if I was okay. I told her I was fine, but tired and needed to return to work. Before getting off the phone, I told her I would be out of town for a while. She asked me where I was going, so I told her the truth. I told her I needed a vacation and would be gone for a week. She started asking about the vacation, and I politely interrupted her, apologized that I needed to get on a conference call, and started to hang up. Just before I hung up, Karol asked me if we could see each other. She said she missed me and wanted to spend the night at my place. I was confused and angry, so I told her I needed to go. A while later, Bren texted me, saying Karol had contacted her, saying I was being cold. Bren said she had just told her she knew I was super busy before taking some time off. She said she asked her when she planned to tell me about the pregnancy. Bren said she was trying to decide if she wanted to keep the baby. This whole situation made me sick to my stomach. I decided I wanted to know who Karol was seeing. I made the not-so-wild guess that Karol was probably seeing this new guy at lunchtime. Since she worked remotely, I moved my schedule around so I could stake out her place and prepared to follow her when she left to meet the guy. As I sat there, none other than Bren's husband, Jason, showed up. I didn't see him park. I just noticed him walking up to her door and knocking while looking around. Karol opened the door and he walked in. He appeared again about 40 minutes later, and they seemed to be arguing. Eventually, they hugged and shared a kiss, as in a kiss on the lips. He left, walking through the apartment complex. I captured everything on my phone. I called Bren, and she picked up. She asked how I was doing, and I said I found out who Karol was seeing. I asked her if she was busy and if we could meet up, and I'd explain. She told me to come over since it was her day off. I honestly didn't know how Bren would take it when I showed her the video. I took her up on the offer and headed over to her house. Jason's job wasn't something he could do from home, so he worked on site and was probably headed back to work. When I arrived at their place, Bren met me at the door, waiting on the porch. We went inside, and Bren gave me a long hug, asking if I was okay. I will admit I had always had a thing for her that I kept on a very short leash, so I wasn't jazzed about being the one to break her heart. She asked me what I found out, so I gave her a brief description of my plan. I then pulled out my phone and sent her the videos from earlier. She pursed her lips while watching them. She seemed a little confused because I had stopped the recording between Jason's arrival and leaving. She asked how long he had been there, and I told her 40 minutes. She just sat there staring at the videos, watching them repeatedly. When she looked up at me, she was mad. I was slightly caught off guard because she seemed angry, not sad. There was no shock, just pure cold anger. She looked at me and said she was sorry. She then went on to say that she was already suspicious because once she told Jason about what Karol had said, Jason got upset. She said he was freaking out, then insisted that they should stay out of it. Jason even told Bren that she should stop talking to Karol. Bren said that Jason and Karol had recently started acting weird around each other. She said that Jason's reaction made her suspicious as soon as they talked about the pregnancy. The video was all Bren needed to decide she was done with Jason. She laughed out loud and asked if I wanted a roommate. I looked at her and said, "Sure," sort of half joking. Bren said, "No, really. Do you want a roommate?" I had to pause for a second, but Bren was my friend, and she needed a place to stay. We had both been betrayed, so I told her that she could absolutely move into my guest room and stay as long as she wanted. She came over to me, and for the first time, I could see tears in her eyes, and we hugged. I could tell she was devastated by Jason's betrayal. Bren asked me if she could grab some stuff and stay at my place that night. I told her we had a few hours so she could grab whatever she wanted. I have a full-size truck, and the round trip is only 15 minutes between our respective houses. Bren and I were able to make 3 full loads of her stuff to my place. We didn't set anything up. We just put it inside the house and went back for more. When she had everything she wanted, she said that A-hole could keep the rest. After loading the last of her stuff, she took her car and headed off to the bank while I drove home and unloaded. Her entire life was sitting in my front room. While I waited for Bren, I moved a few pieces of furniture out of the guest room and replaced them with the stuff Bren took from their house. When she walked through the door, she gave me the biggest, longest hug of my life. Yes, I remember every hug she gives me. She cried for almost 15 minutes while I held her. When she had cried herself out, I guided her into my room and put her in bed. I told her to get some rest and that I'd keep working on her room. I asked her where her phone was and she dug out a SIM card from her pocket. She said that Jason had just gotten the phone for her, but she didn't want to keep it. I went to the kitchen, got my recently retired iPhone out of the junk drawer, and brought it to her. I put the SIM card into the phone, then plugged it in to charge. When she woke up, she could finish the setup. It took me a couple of hours to get her room into shape as much as I could. For all intents and purposes, Bren was now my roommate. I went to the grocery store and made some emergency purchases. You know. I'm a guy, so yeah, my fridge was full of beer, hot dogs, and pizza. I got all the basics I could think of and headed home. I found Bren sitting on the couch, working on setting up the phone. When I came in, she got up and came to hold me again. I could tell she was doing better because she teased me about the groceries being the first real food that I'd ever purchased since she knew me. After setting up the phone, it started to buzz as messages came in. There were a lot from Jason and a few from Karol. She blocked both their phone numbers after reading and listening to the messages. Jason started demanding to know where she was, and after a few messages, it tuned into pleading for her to come home. Eventually, he recognized she knew about the affair and started begging to be allowed to explain. I don't believe she even talked to Jason until the divorce began. I started getting some persistent messages from Karol that same day. I'd been ignoring her phone calls. After discussing it with Bren, I finally just sent a message to her saying that I knew she was pregnant and that I didn't want anything to do with her. Bren made a single post saying she and Jason were no longer together since he had decided to have an affair with Karol, getting her pregnant. She tagged them and the other important people in her life. It was surreal when Bren started cooking dinner that night. In just a few hours, our lives changed that much. I would never have guessed that Bren would be living with me. I realized while setting up Bren's room that although I was hurt and annoyed by Karol cheating, Bren was devastated, losing her best friend and husband at the same time. I never spoke to Karol after sending that message to her. She ended up moving back home and had the baby. Jason followed Karol once the divorce was finalized. Bren got about what you'd expect. Jason was the primary breadwinner, so he got hit for 3 years of alimony based on the length of their marriage, and Bren ended up with half of their collective wealth, including half of the proceeds from the house. The part that bugs me about this whole episode is the fact that it doesn't seem like Jason was preparing to leave Bren. It also seems like Karol was trying to keep me. It would have been easy for her to tell me, "Sorry, this isn't working out." We're guessing this was some friends with benefits thing that blew up. Looking back, I'm a little freaked out about Karol wanting to spend a night with me. It seems like Karol was on the fence about keeping the baby. The paranoid side of me wonders if she was planning on baby trapping me. Maybe I'm the bad guy for thinking that, but I'm being honest. One final lingering thought is that we don't know if a DNA test was done. I guess there is a remote chance it could be mine, but Karol was pretty clear to Bren that she thought it wasn't. Bren and I are still living together, and she started nesting, so I have my fingers crossed that we'll end up together in the future.
I only post new and unique content. Please like and subscribe.